Good evening, everybody. You're very welcome to the very last Unspeakable Bits webinar of the year. And I'm delighted to say that we've got a great panel here tonight. As usual, we have our host, Trevis, and we have Mary McCusker, and we have Deborah Nielsen. Before I hand you over to Trevis, I just want to let people know that if you have any questions, please put it into the Q&A below rather than the chat, and I'll pass on questions to Trevis. And do ask any questions. I'll pass on as many, and we'll try and answer as many as possible during the year. And just to let people know that we have one last, it's on Unspeakable Bits, but it's a webinar with our CE Eva Battles, and that's going to be on Tuesday, the 9th of December. And on all socials tomorrow, you'll be able to find a link for that webinar. So without further ado, I'll pass over to Travis.
All right. Well, thank you, Fergal. And just so everyone knows, we've had some technical issues here on the run-up. So we hope that we'll all be here for the whole hour. Welcome to this, as Fergal said, is our final Unspeakable Bits.
Actually, I'm sorry, just before we, just to get, if we get knocked off, because we just got knocked off there twice before we came on. If we do get knocked off, I'm just going to rejoin again, so you can just rejoin again, people, if we do get knocked off.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
As Fergal said, this is the final of the 2025 series of the Unspeakable Bits. I'm your host, Trevis Gleason. This is our third series. 3 years we've been doing this. And there are a good few folks to thank for their continued support. We certainly have to thank MS Ireland for affording us a platform to delve into these difficult topics. It's never easy to talk about some of these subjects, even among family members and friends who know us and maybe even know MS. Many of our topics have been taboo, subject matter which were once considered something that you just didn't talk about, not just here in Ireland, but in MS communities around the world. And having the time and the space to talk about such things that many aren't comfortable hearing, let alone discussing, is an important resource for those of us living with multiple sclerosis and co-occurring conditions, and our partners and families as well. So a big Garmahagwave to MS Ireland for that. Also, it's impossible to put it on these programs without our expert panelists. We've had leaders in their fields from around the world that have been here with us to talk about the Unspeakable Bits, and we thank them, one and all, for their invaluable help with episodes past, present, and hopefully future. Speaking of which, all of our previous webcasts of the Unspeakable Bits are available on the MS Ireland YouTube channel for your viewing and comments. The programs that are posted there, this program will be posted there in about 24, 48 hours, depending on how Fergal feels tomorrow. So maybe Fergal can put up a link. Well done there. He's on the ball. So you can take a look at any of our previous programs there via that link. And we invite you to submit your questions to our panel tonight via questions tab at the bottom of your screen. As Fergal mentioned, please don't use the chat function. That messes things up. Use the questions tab. Your questions will be put through to us, and we'll get to as many of them tonight as we can. And I did mention our expert panelists. Tonight's no exception, and we're grateful to have Deborah Walsh. Now, Deborah, that's not the last name that Fergal used when he introduced you. So which of us has it right?
Technically, both are right. Walsh is the name I use in work. Nielsen's my married name. Either.
All right, very good. Nielsen Walsh, Walsh Nielsen. She's a senior medical social worker at St. James's Hospital, who has a good bit of hands-on experience working with people living with MS. So, Deborah, I thank you, and you're very welcomed.
Thank you.
Also, tonight is Mary McCusker from MS Ireland. And Mary, I've known you as a regional representative, a regional worker for MS Ireland from the Midwest for a long time. And there's a stack of things that come with that title, but you're now the National Services Development Coordinator. And I know you organized a very successful recent national convention down in Cork. And I wasn't able to attend myself because I was suffering terrible jet lag from arriving the previous afternoon. But I have caught some of it so far on the replay, which is online. And fair play to you. Fergal, I'll ask you maybe to put up a link to those programs that are on that from the conference. It looks like it was a great event, Mary, so well done to you.
Thanks very much, Travis. It was, I don't get quite as much out of it than maybe the attendees do, because I'm running around hoping that everyone's all right. But the feedback it's been positive largely. I like feedback that's very balanced so that we can work on things for next year. But yeah, it's
Well, I think this is probably the first one that on Taoiseach has showed up to. So
that's
that's
true.
well impressive there. For our American and other foreign viewers, that's the Taoiseach is the Prime Minister of Ireland. So I'm sure it was quite an honor to have him there. Now, I know that our topic tonight might sound a bit vague, becoming invisible or disappearing because of MS. And perhaps that's even controversial in the community, but it's something that many of us feel or have felt at one point or another in our lives with MS. And just from that title, we haven't talked about this in advance or anything. I'm wondering if you might each give us a brief insight into how you feel your profession, both what you do personally and what others who do work such as yourselves might fit into this world as it seems to, I don't know, as it looks past us in a lot of ways. So, Deborah, I'm going to start with you on that very broad question.
Yeah, I suppose the role, I guess, of a social worker is really to look at the kind of practical, emotional, and social impact of someone's illness. So, in terms of when somebody feels that they are becoming invisible or, is starting to move away from society in some way, that's exactly where we often come in, and try and kind of figure out what's going on for them, try and help them to navigate re-entering society, or if that's not what they want, then coping with kind of the issues that they have coming up for them at that time. So it can really be, it's a funny one a lot of the time when we get asked, what is the role of a social worker, or what do you do? You're kind of going, I don't know, really. Just what do you want me to do? It very much depends on the individual and what they need, what they feel they need. And I know you talk about the expert panel, but the clients or the patients that I work with are very much the experts in their lives. And I'm coming in to kind of say, look, your life, what you want, what you need. Tell me how I can help with that. And that's really, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's really kind of how we, I suppose, become involved with people who are experiencing this sort of feeling.
Yeah, no, I think that's perfect, and I think that's important for people to hear because a lot of times we don't feel like we're experts at all. We do feel lost, and sometimes it's simply that no, actually, you're doing better than you think. Is something you really want to hear. And then Mary, MS societies often are referred to as patient advocacy organizations, and sometimes we see that is a really big, broad statement having to do with governments and policies and all that. But advocacy is far more than just that. And self-advocacy is obviously a huge part of what we're going to talk about tonight. So maybe you can tell us how MS Ireland gets involved then.
So I suppose like the way I would see it is, so the role I'm in now with the MS Society. So I was a regional community worker up until about 2 years ago, and that role itself is quite similar to what Deborah is describing in terms of that person to support is there to support the person with MS, to encourage them to make social connections if that is what they're actually looking for when we're talking about that visible invisible piece. But I suppose in the last couple of years, as my role has kind of evolved and changed, um, I would see this role and the work that we do as we're like the conduit, like the facilitator to enable the community to become seen and to become more visible. In whichever way they're looking to do that. So one arm of the work that I'm involved in is to create opportunities for social connection and peer support. So that's one area that I'm focusing on. And then I support other staff in their work, for example, in advocacy, which is about the policy piece that you mentioned there, and how do we improve and support people to have their voices heard in a more meaningful way, both for themselves, maybe when they're going to a neurology appointment, up to how we improve those opportunities at a policy level, if that makes sense.
No,
So
it does
it's
indeed. It does
diverse,
indeed.
really.
Yeah, very good. So this is both macro and micro when it comes to a person's life and a society's life with MS. When I try to explain this concept of the topic to a few people, they kind of weren't getting the idea that we become invisible to society. And the best way that I came upon describing it was a number of years ago. I brought I say my puppy. By this point, she was 8 years old. To back to her breeder in Athy in County Kildare, because we were going to get a new puppy, and a dam had just had a series of puppies, so a litter, so we brought her up there. And first she got to know the mother, etc., and all was good. And then the puppies came running out. And our Sadie put her chin up 2 notches and just looked above the fray. She didn't want to be part of what was going on there, etc. Our breeder said she had no maternal instinct. And sometimes it feels kind of like that's it. Like the greater society, the world just sort of doesn't want to see it, doesn't want to be affected by it. And I've read some really interesting research that has come out of Scandinavia in recent years. They've got great patient registries there, so they can follow people on so many different avenues of their lives. And this particular research shows that it appears that by the time people are diagnosed with MS, this is okay, you have MS. They're able to go back in the files, etc., and many have already begun to lag behind their age-like cohort in things like income, promotion, work status, managerial posts, etc. So even before we hear the words "you have MS," it seems like the world might be beginning to lift their heads and sort of look over us. Is that because maybe we're not performing as well as others, or we're taking more sick days, or we're having to see doctors in the run up to, etc. Now, I'm going to start with you, Mary, here. I know that MS Ireland's put a good bit of work into the financial effects of MS. That's both on people and the MS Irish society, I should say, not just MS in general. But what does that picture look like for Ireland as far as the cost of MS and the price of MS here in the country?
I wish I'd read the societal costs before I came on now, Trevis,
That's all right.
because
That's
we
all
have a
right.
whole
But it's
document
out
that
there.
details it.
And people could probably find that online, yes?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. All of those publications are on our website. Like it's really like I mean, from what you described, Travis, is absolutely right. We know that from an economic point of view and at a household level, that where there's a family member living with MS within a household, they are much more likely to have a lower standard of living than somebody who has a different sort of household composition, or whether there isn't somebody with a chronic illness in that household. Um, we know that you know, fatigue, for example, is one of the biggest reasons, or the most commonly cited reason for somebody coming out of paid employment. And when you when you describe that in the intro there, Travis, around how even before somebody's diagnosed, they're already kind of maybe not achieving the level from an employment point of view that they might do otherwise, it kind of makes sense. If fatigue, like if somebody is experiencing symptoms for a number of years in particular, how impactful that's going to be. And by the time they're diagnosed, maybe they're considering other forms of employment, or or just struggling so much within that environment anyway. So um I'm kind of I'm kind of talking around it a little, Travis, but I mean, what we know is that the impact is huge,
Mhm.
um from an economic point of view, for sure.
And that's personally, and that's also for the society. I mean, not the MS society, but the greater the national economy, etc. I think it was something like 90,000 euro or something per person with MS that affects the national economy when it comes to healthcare and lost productivity and all that. And don't quote me on that number, our dear reader. But again, and perhaps Fergal can find that a link to that report that was put out. A lot of work went into that.
The
And so this
figures are
this is just
stark.
one.
They are definitely stark. And even like when I'd reflect maybe on the work as a community worker, where you're supporting people around their financial needs. So you're supporting them to fill in forms for benefits and entitlements, maybe medical card and those sorts of things. Like their need is acute, like, and it's very, very stark in in some cases. Um you know,
And
that's
it's one of those things that a lot of us, sorry, I didn't mean to cut across you there. A lot of us, when we say, "Oh, I don't feel invisible," or "Geez, am I the only one that feels like the world's moving on without me?" In a lot of cases, it does feel like that, and it's a valid feeling. And Deborah, I'm sure that by the time someone comes to see you, now that means that they've gone through their GP and the whole diagnostic process, and maybe even seen, excuse me, a more generalized neurologist before kind of coming into St. James's and a more specific clinic setting. So several years or months or maybe even years have elapsed since diagnosis. In that case, you must see people who are experiencing like so many facets of MS just beyond just the physical symptoms. And that's one of the things that we're trying to deal with first is the physical, but how do you help patients to maybe triage all of the things that they're dealing with and try to focus in on just maybe one or two important things at a time? And how might we triage that for ourselves?
Yeah, I guess what we usually do is just talk to the person about what seems the most important to you at this particular moment in time. So generally, I think what happens when you get overwhelmed by a lot of different thoughts or issues in your head, you can't make head or tail of them. You know, they all kind of form this um, one big ball of stress.
Yes.
It's just hard to kind of navigate that. So generally, we would try and get people to, just sort of spit it all out, get all of the issues out in the open. Sometimes write them down can be helpful. And then pick one or two. What are the highlights? What are the ones that are feeling the most urgent at this point in time? And start to go through those. And I always love the phrase, "How do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time." It's you take this monstrous thing and you try and break it down into smaller pieces. Um, and you're right. I think we by the time people get to me, they're already diagnosed most of the time, or just being diagnosed. So sometimes I'd see people at the point of diagnosis or many many years into their illness. And the issues that are coming up for them can be completely different. You could have somebody just kind of getting used to the illness, or you could have somebody who's uh, been there, done that, and is completely an expert in MS, way more than I would be. Um, so yeah, the situations and issues that people have coming up for them can be very much MS related, or you know MS adjacent, if you like.
Mhm.
Um, basic kind of lifestyle issues that anyone could experience, but that are impacted, I guess, by the MS as well.
And you made a really great point there. Most of us with MS have gotten good enough, if not pretty good, at sort of identifying and prioritizing things for our energy levels. These 10 things should get done today, or these five need to get done, these two must get done, these four I'd like to get done, whatever it is. It sounds like that exercise, which most of us do on a regular basis, either consciously or even unconsciously, um, that's a good place to start when it comes to coping with the non-symptomatic ball of stuff, as you'd mentioned, of MS. So that's a really good point, and that's getting back to that thing that both of you were talking about is we're probably better at this than we give ourselves, excuse me, credit for being. And so to generalize those skills, if you were a professional manager before MS, well, you just might have to professionally manage your symptoms and coexisting conditions and all of that. So I see that Fergal has just put up the societal costs of MS there, and we appreciate that very much. Now, I guess this is an important slice of living with MS that many don't think about at the beginning, the dealing with MS beyond the physical. And we can be so focused, and I suppose at the beginning, particularly rightfully so, on what the disease is doing to our body and looking inward, that they might see themselves fading from the greater part of society. Um, but I think just in these first few minutes, we've talked about that society is already not looking directly at us, and we're sort of kind of cowering sometimes. Have you any advice for, let's say, those relatively newly diagnosed folks listening on how to talk to someone about the non-physical stuff when it comes to MS. Mary, let's say somebody gets in touch with a society and says, help with not the stuff that the neurologist can handle, the physio can handle with medications and physical stuff. When they come, where would you send them?
So a lot of people, when they first make contact with us, particularly around diagnosis, would be through the MS information line. So a lot of people will make a call. The call will be answered. It may not be answered straight away, but a call will be returned to them. And that, for a lot of people, is the moment of the big deep breath, and it all kind of comes out, or sometimes you have to tease it out a little bit. And typically arising out of that discussion, and there could be anything in it, any number of things. We who My colleague Aoife Kerwin, who's typically on the information line, would refer them or signpost them to a regional community worker. So that person then is available to them in their area to meet with them at a place and a time that suits them, to go through some of their concerns and help them navigate this kind of new environment in lots of ways. Like the healthcare system is tricky to navigate, and understanding where referrals should go to and what services are relevant and those sorts of things. So in some ways, it's very, very similar to what Deborah would likely do in her work environment as well. So that would be typically how a person would make contact, and that's typically what we would suggest in terms of support. Now, there can be specifics in that as well. A person may make a call around diagnosis and they really just want information and support around one issue. So it could be around employment, for example. So in that case, because they may not want to link in with the service directly, we would signpost them to the likes of employability for employment support if that's what they're looking for. They may have some challenges within their current employment, so we'd give them some suggestions and point them in the right direction in terms of trade unions and that sort of thing. But there could be any number of issues. Citizens information is a very common suggestion to people newly diagnosed and beyond, because they are really the best at what they do in terms of benefits and entitlements. Like, you are going to get the best information from that point of view from that service, and the most up-to-date information. So it can really vary. And again, it's client-led, it's person-led. You follow the person, or you support the person based on what they're bringing to you at that time. And the door is left open, so it's very much dip in, dip out when is needed and required.
Thank you, Mary. And please don't hesitate to type in your questions. We've got a few coming in through so far, but make sure they're in the questions, not in the chat function. I know John was wondering why the chat function was disabled. It's so that we can handle these questions. We have another one that's come in reference to state pensions, etc. We'll get to a bit of that later. Now, I've often said that in many aspects of living my life with MS, it feels like I'm living a life fast forward. And by that, I mean, I might be experiencing many things the way someone that's maybe 30, 40, even 50 years my senior might experience them. That's both physical, psychosocial, social welfare services wise. Deborah, as a social worker now, what lessons might we take from an older cohort of people, not MS, but just the general elderly aging population, as to how to remain, or in some cases regain, a place, if not the same place, in society when we're ready?
Yeah, well, I think the older population are great at, engaging in kind of clubs, societies, voluntary work. Like, there's a lot out there that you can do to kind of fit into society when you don't feel comfortable in maybe the formal employment setting anymore. But equally, we've come a long way. Well, a decent way since the pandemic, I suppose, at kind of being a little bit more flexible around work arrangements and things like that. And that can help people if they do want to remain in kind of employment and stuff. And there's a lot of support kind of within the kind of MS unit for that, to be able to do that. But as you said, our older kind of population really, I guess we've been used to an aging population in Ireland, particularly, and the services and supports that are out there for them are probably a bit more robust than maybe they would be for a younger cohort coming into those services. But there is certainly, a place for those kind of things, as I mentioned, voluntary work and that, or even, your local library as well has a massive amount of support and resources in terms of even short courses and things that people can do, um, book clubs, exercise classes, and a lot of them, you've got things like chair yoga and stuff that would be more accessible maybe for people with mobility difficulties and stuff like that. So there is a lot out there that people can do, and I think it's just about finding something that you feel comfortable with. And there's always going to be nerves, but taking a little step forward and trying things out, and also not being afraid to kind of, you know, I say this with, trying to be nice, but don't be afraid to make a fool of yourself as well. We're all very, stadier one kind of in in Ireland. We're not great at. We're good sometimes at laughing at ourselves, but we're very good at laughing at others. Um, but I think that just not being afraid to, to be a little bit silly and to get things wrong as well, and to try things out and find that they don't suit you, and then try again, at another stage, or try something different. Just being open to that change, I guess.
Yeah, I recently saw a piece. It was on YouTube. It was a TED Talk, and it was an older gentleman talking about the 5 stages of retirement. And it was sort of like the first thing was, oh, brilliant. I'm on permanent vacation now. I'm on holidays for the rest of my life, and that lasts about a year. And then there's sort of this feeling of worthlessness and being literally and figuratively on the dole for the rest of your life. So we're not the only ones that experience this, and it's really important to try to engage in a way that we feel useful. I mean, I've always said that we don't just work for a paycheck, but we work for so much more than that. And the social acceptability and the feeling like we're of use, that we're of worth and have value to the greater, I think is a big chunk of that. Now, Mary, I know that the work that MS Ireland puts in, like via the care centre, could to some seem like a set of services that should be there for the elderly versus people that are living in the prime of their life. But there is a lot beyond just the physical care that takes place at the care center. You want to just touch a little bit on that? I know that's a big part of what the society does.
Well, actually, this week in the care centre, they're having a specific younger persons week. No, I'm not actually sure what the upper age limit on younger person is, because this is always an internal debate that we have when we run kind of age segregated services, I suppose. But that's actually happening this week in the care centre. So there's a group of people there that are coming together. Some of them will know each other, some won't. Um, they are they're basically coming there to be cared for sure. But they're mostly coming to experience um a social kind of a social event, as it were, for a week, a holiday essentially, where they get to meet each other, they get to know each other, they get to go out of the care centre as well. Like, they're not going to be on the grounds of the care centre for the whole week that they're there. They'll be out. There's outings included, and I suppose crucially, like what comes out of a week like that is that they're friendships. I mean, we talk the language in this sector of things like peer support and social connection and those sorts of things, and that's very true. But actually, what we're talking about is friendships, and it's those friendships that are enduring typically, and they're essential. Like, we all need these people to be. We all need people like us to understand. To understand the challenges, to understand the opportunities as well, because I'll always have an upside, or I'll always try to have an upside to things. Um, but that's crucially what the care centre offers. Now, it offers that to other age groups as well, and they're really, really good at it. But I think that maybe there's less of awareness of a focus on a younger cohort for the care centre in particular. And I suppose that that sort of creating opportunities for connection, for developing friendship is something that happens, yes, in the care centre, but it also happens regionally through the regional offices where opportunities are created for people to come together, essentially, whether it's coffee morning, whether it's fundraiser, whether it's a fatigue management program, whether it's an exercise group. There are a purpose to all of these groups that may sound and appear one way, but they're just as much about bringing people together to create opportunities to develop friendships. Um, and that's aside from the work of the voluntary branches as well. And perhaps we'll go into that in a little while, but I think it's really important to highlight the work that they do in supporting people to meet each other and to advocate for the community as well. Like that often doesn't, we don't talk enough about that probably. So I've kind of gone off on a small bit of a tangent there, Travis, but there's that's the focus really, I suppose, in terms of
There's
this.
no worry there because the tangents are where the real work gets done, and we know that very well. And we've got a couple of questions coming in, and we will definitely get to those. Um, Even when we either have or have regained a bit of a grasp on ourselves, at least our sense of self, no matter how hard MS tries to knock it away, the world around us can seem like it would rather it didn't have to deal with us. So, Deborah, I'm going to ask you, how do we stand up for ourselves? And it's sometimes the simple fact of standing literally can be a chore, but I'm talking figuratively standing up for ourselves when we feel like we're not getting our fair shake.
Yeah, I mean that's a really, really hard one to do because I think, as you know, a lot of the time with MS comes kind of mood disorders as well, like depression, anxiety, and it can be really, really hard. You have to be, you know, often 80% braver than the average person in your everyday life just to take, a step outside your front door. So, and it comes with the, physical and other challenges as well. Um, so I think, as you say, sometimes physically standing up is very, very difficult, and then having the mental strength on top of everything that you're going through on a day-to-day basis to kind of stand up for yourself figuratively is extremely difficult to do. Um, I guess it's small ways, it's just having those conversations with people. If it's in employment that you feel you're not getting kind of a fair um chance at you know being able to contribute to your job in a meaningful way. I think it's having that conversation with your manager, seeking support as well from either, whether it's friends or family or another professional, to sort of feel like you have that backup. Because, often when we can't stand up for ourselves, it's when we feel very isolated. And I suppose just recognizing as well that we have a huge negative bias, and that we do have a tendency towards negative self-talk. So kind of being able to challenge that and feeling like you are worthy of accessing whatever, whether it's a support that you're looking for or a particular service that you feel you're not being fairly treated in accessing something. Um, Being able to tell yourself, no, I do deserve this, and I deserve the same chances as everyone else. And challenging that thought in your head that suggests you don't. Or my biggest pet peeve actually is the somebody worse off than me.
Oh,
I'm I'm sure there's plenty of people worse off than everyone else, but it never makes your life any easier. So
no, it is a safe first step in the self-worth ladder though. So it is not a bad place to start. Now, a couple of questions or comments, I suppose. Mary, when it comes to asking for assistance in the home, our man John here has asked. He asked the HSE for help, but they say he's too young because he can get out of bed, he can shower without any aid, but he knows that he can't do the things that he used to. How do we get the system to understand that we don't we don't want to have to be bedridden before we get some help, because we can still be of use if we have a little bit of help.
So in the event of like a person feeling either feeling that they are entitled to a service and they're not getting it, or they know objectively like they are entitled to it and they're not getting it. Like I would always suggest that the person um makes their dissatisfaction known within public services. So in a nutshell, that would involve it's called Your Service, Your Say. And it's a HSE kind of function where a person who is not happy or is happy, it's not just for, I don't like using the word complaint, because when people hear that, they kind of draw breath and want to move away from me. People in Ireland do not like complaining, and I understand that, and people are afraid to, because they feel like they're going to lose a service, or it's going to affect a relationship with a healthcare professional. But I think it's really, really important that we start to make our dissatisfaction known. And this is a really straightforward way of doing that. You can do it online, you can do it over the phone, you can do it by email, and you can basically go onto the HSE website and do it that way. And if you make, or if a person submits their dissatisfaction, or their happiness about a particular thing, the HSE are obliged to follow up. And for the most part, and in my experience as a community worker in the past, what I find is that people are not willing to do that. And I think it's a real pity, because it's a very straightforward way that somebody can have their voice heard.
And could
Um,
you give us that, what's that thing called again?
it's called Your Service, Your Say. Just as I when I stop talking, I'll put the link in the chat. I'll put a direct link into the from the website, so that people will be brought directly to it. I have heard from other services where people have been unhappy, and they've they've let the HSE know it using this function, and they have gotten feedback from it. It mightn't resolve the issue, but the more people that do this, um, the more it raises the issue, and it will raise the profile. I'd love to see it done more collectively. But it's a real culture. There's a real cultural barrier to complaining. So it is a challenge. So that's a very practical way that somebody can have their voice heard. And I'm just going to give I'll be brief now, but I'll just give an example of a piece of work that our advocacy officer did with a group of participants in some of our exercise programs there recently. And we, like many of the listeners here, will know that we have active business cases at the moment, looking for funding for various things, one of which is a physio-led exercise service across the whole country. Um, and one of the things that we have done to raise the profile of this was working with a group of participants in some of these classes, where we've done some training, some very brief training with them around, yes, there was the Your Service, Your Say piece, which I've just described, but it was also, how do I raise my issue with my local public representative? And we went through the steps with this group as to how they might do that. And there was about 25 participants in this particular program, and off the majority went with their letter to their TD, to their local TD, and they told the TD what it is they wanted, what it is they needed, and why they needed it. And it was very structured, but it was very doable. And the feedback from those that went off and they did that piece of work for us, for the organisation, but for themselves as well, was really, really positive. So there's two ways that a person can have their voice heard in outside of outside, I guess, of the clinical setting, as it were, because that's kind of a whole other area. But I hope that people can hear that, and hear that it's actually something quite tangible that can be done.
Right. That's brilliant. And your TDs, they'll have local clinics, et cetera, monthly or something, so you
Yeah.
can certainly go and talk to them. Sharon has said that she's thankfully employed, and she loves the idea of a lot of what's going on here, but that we're talking about book clubs and exercise and things like that, but she's still working. So it's a great idea if some of these things could be organized in the evenings for people who are still working. But one of the things I think is important is that maybe, and thank you for that link there, Mary, maybe you try to do something outside of the MS community. If it's a book club, it really doesn't matter if it's a MS book club or if it's your local library's book club. Some of the things that I've found, while my involvement in the MS Society in America and now here has been very helpful in bringing back my confidence, I suppose, in doing things. I get great satisfaction in being able to plug in a little bit, nowhere near as much as before, in regular society. I don't want to say normal society because we just live in a new normal, but I think that's important. Also, there's for John there, maybe a local center for independent living could be helpful for people under 66 who might need a personal assistant. So great there. Moving on. Many of us with MS, those first few years can send us for a tumble. And I often say of myself, it took me 5 years to get my head around what MS was doing to my body before I could actually get my heart around living with a disease. Now, in that time, be it a year, two, even longer, the gears of the world of our former lives, they just keep turning, and trying to jump back into that life might be like trying to catch a carousel horse while it's still going around. Deborah, I want to ask you what some of the signs might be that when we look for in ourselves, or perhaps that maybe our partners might see these things that says that we might consider seeing a professional for help when it comes to this part of living with MS.
The emotional part.
Yeah.
Yeah. I suppose, like, look, we all experience kind of some symptoms of kind of depression, anxiety in our daily lives. It's normal to an extent, but I think where you need to seek professional help is when those feelings or symptoms become enduring. So you've got things like that for depression, kind of feelings of isolation, withdrawing, isolating yourself, low motivation, not wanting to get up out of bed, maybe not wanting to get dressed, no appetite. And then, anxiety on the other side can be that kind of fear of the everyday, that kind of discomfort. There's a lot of physical symptoms, I suppose, that come with anxiety as well, in terms of kind of racing heart and that kind of thing. But again, when those symptoms are really just getting in the way of your everyday life, on a regular basis, and often they kind of say for about 2 weeks or more, if they're there, that's when you need to seek help. And I think, people often know themselves. You can have days where you just don't want to do anything, and you can have low motivation, and that can sometimes go on for 2 or 3 days. Sometimes if you're going through a difficult patch for whatever reason. But if you get to after a couple of days and you just don't seem to be able to pick yourself back up again, that's when I think you start looking for help.
That's really important because I think most of us who have lived the disease for a little while, particularly in the relapsing and remitting phase, will know the old adage of if it's 24 to 48 hours, you don't have a fever and it's not happened before, or if it's a worsening of a previous physical symptom, get in because it's probably an exacerbation. It's probably a flare of the disease. So you're saying if there's something on that emotional level that is different, that's difficult, and it is lasting, you said 2 weeks, I think.
Yeah,
Then that's the same.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's kind of the same. And often you probably know, even with your physical symptoms, you kind of just feel something isn't right here.
Mhm.
And it's the same with the emotional. Like, we kind of, I think, are a little bit afraid of our emotions sometimes, and it's very similar to kind of physical symptoms. Our mental health is very similar to our physical health in the way that we should treat it. And it, if something just doesn't feel right, then it probably isn't. And sometimes it can be as simple as having a conversation about it, and some minor lifestyle changes can have a huge impact and make a huge difference. But it's just about taking that step and reaching out to someone to say, look, something doesn't feel right here.
And it's important, I think, for all of us, maybe particular men, but I'm only speaking from this side, that it's not a sign of weakness to ask for help, particularly when it comes to this. We're used to, if we can't lift something, we'll ask somebody to help us lift it. This is something that it's a sign of strength if you recognize that you need some assistance in doing something and you actually ask for it. And speaking of which, now, Mary, I don't know this to be fact, but we're getting an anonymous attendee is saying MS Ireland has a list of only 3 therapists online, and all of them are women. Is that something that perhaps you can take a look into, and maybe we can put something up on that later, or are you aware of that?
No, but just we don't have a funded psychotherapy service. Like we're not funded to provide that. Typically what can happen in regions is that local branches are approached to help support the cost of a person if they need psychotherapy or
But just
something.
as far as a
Yeah.
resource list, is there anything
As a
out there that?
resource list. Okay. I don't, I'd need to look at it. I'm not familiar with it off the top of my head, but I did just pop into the chat. There was a new publication that was launched there on Saturday, which is the Mood and Emotions booklet. It's just
Right,
as
I saw
Deborah
that.
was talking, it was very, very related to some of the themes and the issues she was describing. So it's a short booklet, but it's really like it's useful, I think is fair to say, in terms of what to expect and maybe how to respond to some of those sorts of challenges. As it's really just a useful resource. But I will have a look at the therapist piece.
Okay,
Um,
it's good. And these are great little conversations to have, and everyone gets something out of these. And I was going to say something, but MS. I'm a big fan of the Irish health system. As someone who's lived and experienced healthcare in a few places in the world, I think that while, no, don't get me wrong, it's got its issues. I've had excellent care here. And one aspect that I really find important and helpful and useful is the GP system. I find that my local GP is excellent place to start when it comes to most of my medical and even some of the psychosocial issues that I might experience. A good GP can find the crux of an issue in a conversation. Just like a good neurologist is using the chat back and forth as part of the clinical observation. This is sort of a medical signposting. It's something that both of you will have some experience with. And Mary, you had mentioned a little bit with signposting. Can you tell us about how MS Ireland can help people to be pointed in the right direction?
I can. So a lot of it will come down to the regional community work. I know there's a reason why we do our best to signpost through the information line if that's where they come. But elsewhere, we'll always try and steer people to the local community worker because they have the local knowledge and services vary hugely across the country. And particularly when we talk, like we can talk about, like you could sort of look at the kind of the more statutory oriented services, but then also where the community services also come in. And the local knowledge around that is really where that's where the value is because like you can have in an area you could have like a fantastic family resource center or you could have a number of community centers that are really really active in terms of offering classes and programs and all sorts of things where in another area you mightn't have that but you might have something different, so that local knowledge really is the key piece, and I'd encourage people to link in with that person with their person, if they're struggling in some way for sure, but if they need to know what else is available to them in their local area. Our community workers aren't social prescribers, but they kind of act in that way at times. I know certainly I would have done in my work as a community worker. When you know what's happening locally, it's much easier to I'm going to say signpost, but I think it's actually more than that because good signposting is more than just saying, oh, pop down to your family resource centre and talk to Jackie. It's actually, um, this is the name, this is the number. Let's give a call now and make an appointment for you to meet this person, check in with them maybe the day after to see did they actually make that appointment, did they actually attend that appointment or that meeting that they said they were going to do. So there's a difference between off you go now, I've given you the information or I've written it down on a sheet of paper for you, to actually really supporting somebody, to like really encouraging them to take that step, because those steps into the unknown for people, where whether it's if you're encouraging that kind of social connection piece, it can be really frightening. It really can be. So following up is really the essential piece. I would think is fair to say.
No, and that's why we're members of the society, I think, when it comes down to it. Um, uh, Deborah, you might be able to directly help every patient with everything, but you might still be able to guide them. How does a medical social worker help people find the right answers when they feel like they're just slipping out of view of the world?
It really comes down to empowerment. And I think, as I said at the very beginning, it's not, I sometimes help people to navigate or to find the answers, but they have those answers within themselves most of the time. It might come down to signposting, kind of similar to what Mary said. You might be looking at services or supports that can help a person navigate some of the issues that they're having. But at the end of the day, they're coming with a whole wealth of experience in living life and also dealing with their own set of needs and circumstances. And sometimes it's just a conversation to tease out what is going on, what's the difficulty that you're having right now, and how can we kind of move past that. Sometimes that can just be helping someone to sit down and create a set of goals. And as Mary said, following up to try and see, have they managed to achieve that, and if not, why not? Have we gone too fast, too soon, too many tasks? Is it not smart enough, if you like? To try and things have to be done in small chunks where people feel comfortable as well. Because I think if somebody comes to me, they're already overwhelmed. You're not seeing a social worker because things are going well. It's usually when something has been difficult for you that you reach out to a social worker. So it's just trying to see how we can use the skills and the knowledge that that person already has to try and help them to find their own way forward.
I think that's important. That's part of the empowerment, is to realize that that we had the power, and we only relinquish the power if we open our hands and let it away. That's not something that MS can take away from us, is that power. And the other thing I think it's important for people to understand is, number one, yes, society can and does sometimes look through us, look past us, look over us, particularly for people in wheelchairs and assistive devices like that, literally looking over the top. But a lot of times, it mayn't be as bad as we think, because we're dealing with all of the other stuff, and that sort of just gets swept into the maelstrom, the whirlpool of it all. Is that it is indeed, it can be real, but it mayn't be as bad as we are perceiving it to be, because we're dealing with all of those other things. And as you said, teasing things out. I think that's an imperative, difficult, and probably best handled with a professional that can see it from the outside. Because even the best of intentioned friends and family, they're sort of swimming in that same water with us in certain ways. And I have to say this, and as it always does, our time is quickly coming to an end, and I apologize to all of our guests for that. There's so much to discuss on this topic and so many others, but MS fatigue and all, we have to know when to say when. So I'd like to give both of you a chance to give some final thoughts on this topic. I again appreciate both of you jumping in with us on something that seemed fairly vague, but as I knew you would, you've wrote in and you've made it a lot clearer. So Mary, I'll start with you on some final thoughts there.
Sure, I think it's really important for people here to hear that as an organization, we hear loud and clear that mental health is one of the most pressing issues facing the community. So in the My MS My Needs study there a couple of years ago, I forget now, I think it was over 30%. It's thereabouts of the respondents, and there were over 900 respondents to the survey, which is a really good number. They cited mental health as their biggest concern. So we've heard that. We do hear it. and certainly from the work that I've been involved in over the years, I've seen it. I've seen it in all different sorts of presentations. But I just would like to let the listeners know that we are in response to one of the responses to that was that we're now working with Maynooth University on a HRB funded research project around that very issue to really delve far deeper than we have done before around what the specific needs of the community are in terms of mental health supports. What do those supports really look like? Because we can often kind of immediately go to counselling, for example. And I think that's we have a sense that that's part of the support that's needed, but it could well be broader than that. So this study, which will be led by Rebecca Maguire, some of you may know of Rebecca. She was on our board up until recently. She is also a person with MS, and she's leading this project in Maynooth. So we're really excited about it. We have HRB funding to further this project with Maynooth. Really exciting time. And within the next 2 years, we'll start seeing some really exciting results around this particular piece of work. So I probably have loads more to say about it, Trevis. But
Loads more, but no
I really
time.
wanted people to hear that we know that this is a huge issue. We're not ignoring it. We wish we were doing more now, but we really wanted to move forward in an evidence-based way, because that's what the policymakers need to see.
Yeah, they do. And we're seeing a comment right now saying that, the cost of therapies is huge, €80
Yeah.
plus per session. That's a lot.
Yeah.
Deborah, some final thoughts from you.
Yeah, very similarly to what Mary was kind of talking about earlier, and the policymakers, that's the people who need to know what's going on for people. So absolutely using your service, your say, any sort of feedback that you can give, whether it's, kind of what John was talking about with some of the physical things that are maybe not covered in things like a home care package anymore. They need to know that, so that, we harp on about it all the time, but unfortunately nobody listens. So it needs to come from the service users themselves as well as us. But I think really just, with all of this, with all of kind of any sort of, starting to feel invisible or moving away from society, when you get to that point where you start to feel that something is going wrong, just reaching out. It doesn't matter at the beginning who you reach out to, whether it's a family member, whether it's a professional, whether it's MS Ireland, whoever you feel comfortable to initially reach out to and talk to, please do it, because there is support and there is help out there, and it might not be exactly what you envisage, or it might not work for you the first time around, but there are ways to get past this kind of feeling of kind of moving away from society and feeling like you're invisible or nobody's paying attention and nobody's listening. Particularly for the health service, nobody goes into the health service, for bad reasons. Most of the time, people who are in the health service and who are working for places like MS Ireland, they want to help people, and I think there's not always the resources out there to allow us to do that to the best of our ability, but we still do want to help, and we will, all of those services will always try their best to do what they can. So just
Well, and both of you have represented both your professions, your organizations, et cetera, very well tonight. And it shows that here you're spending an hour in the evening of your own time to try to help those with MS out. And I thank you very much to both of you, Deborah Walsh and Mary McCusker. You've helped far more people to a far greater extent tonight than I think you'll ever know. And for that, on behalf of the community, I want to thank you. We're very grateful. So this ends our 2025 series, The Unspeakable Bits. Our thanks again to MS Ireland for giving us the time and the space to talk about these things, and to Fergal, as always, for all your work in getting these programs to our audience. We hope to be back again in the new year with more Unspeakable Bits programs. And until then, I'm Trevis Gleason. I'm your host, and I'm wishing you and your family the best of health. Cheers, and back to you, Fergal.
So just like people know that we've recorded this episode, and as usual, I'll put it up on the MS Ireland YouTube channel tomorrow, and it'll be on all our social media channels as well. And all the previous episodes are all there in a playlist, the Unspeakable Bits. And just also to let you know that we've one more webinar this year with our CE Ava Battle. So that's on Tuesday, the 9th of December, 7 p.m. And again, tomorrow I'll put up a link on socials for that webinar. So finally, first want to thank Trevis for all the Unspeakable Bits that he's done this year. And I look forward to loads more again next year. And to Deborah and Mary for being wonderful guests. We really appreciate it. And take care, everybody, and see you again soon. Take care.
Cheers.
Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.